Welcome to CBTV.
Our family lived out in the woods without electricity or running water. Both of my parents were mentally ill and believed that God spoke to them directly. They didn't believe in education or medical care. They were the oldest of seven. I was the oldest of seven, and all of us were physically abused. The only thing that saved me is that I knew it was wrong. I always plotted my escape. I wrote diary entries when I was 8 years old, vowing to live a different life. And when I was 16, I got pregnant with my first boyfriend. The pregnancies were actually planned because I thought it would get me out of the house. And I was right. My mom was so angry that she kicked me out. And I moved in with my boyfriend's parents. Their names were Esther and Sylvie. They had a lovely house with a fireplace. They had dinners every night at the table and used napkins. They were probably lower middle class, but to me it seemed like opulence. Esther and Sylvie showed me a different way. They treated me like their own daughter. When I was 7 months pregnant, my raging mother came banging on the front door. Esther let her in and my mother started shouting. She said I was a whore and an evil person. I was terrified. I crouched in the stairwell and listened to everything. When my mother finished, Esther replied, "That is not what we see at all. Linda is a good person. She's smart and very helpful, and she's going to be a wonderful mother." Esther helped me raise my daughter and finish high school. I went on to become a lawyer and adopt 2 additional children. But even now, 40 years later, I still can hear the words she said. Why I crouched in the stairwell. Linda is a good person. It was the first time that anyone had ever stood up for me. And it's funny how things turned out, because I was never a brave mother in the beginning. I was very fearful. Gabby never learned to ride a bike because I was so scared that she'd fall down and break a bone. In Brazil especially, there seems to be a belief that daughters are made of glass and crystal. But soon enough I realized I need to raise her like I am, not embarrassed to eat by herself or go to the movie by herself or raise a children by herself. So I pushed her to be more independent. In 2015, we were listening to a lot of news stories about Syrian refugee crisis. Gabby was 15 by then and she already spoke very good English. So she was determined to help. We organized a trip to the Greek island of Lesbos, where many of the refugees were landing. During that trip, my daughter turned into a woman right before my eyes. Not only a woman, a giant. She helped thousands of people out of boat. I was so freaking worried. Some of these people had hemothermia, so I thought someone might die in front of her. But Gabby was so energized. She never grew tired. And by the time we got home, everything has changed. She wanted to do more. She went back to Greece on her next vacation, but this time she went alone. Since then, she's been all over the world helping refugees. It's her life now. There have been articles about her. She's even in the textbook, you know. Back when I was pregnant with Gabby, I had this silly idea that I needed to become a great journalist, so that my daughters would be proud of me one day, and she'd tell her friends at school about me. But that never happened. My daughters is the one to be proud of, and I'm here to clear the way for her. My daughters is the one to be proud of, and I'm here to clear the way for her, like Sarah Connor in the Terminator movie. Recently, I retired from journalism so that I could open a flower company. Gabby owned 50% of the company, and we used the profits to fund her volunteer work. So I might not be famous journalist, but I'm fucking good mother. My partners and I were looking to foster a child, so we decided to attend some parenting courses. There was about five different couples in the class, and we were doing these icebreaker things where everyone shared their reason for wanting to become a foster parent. But it came around to one guy, he sort of shrugged and said, "We already have three kids, but then extra seat in our minivan." Everyone started laughing. The whole room relaxed. And that's my first memory of Larkin. His were attending the class with his wife, Kathy, and I was drawn to them immediately. They were just such obviously good people. We started eating lunch with them on our breaks. We visit them on weekends. One Halloween we were trick or treating with their kids, and Larkin sat me down on a tube and asked why we hadn't fostered yet. That's when I told him about my health problems. My mother had given me a kidney transplant 15 years earlier, and it was beginning to fail. I was on heavy dialysis. I need blood transfusion. Soon I would need another kidney, but I couldn't find a match. I never asked him. I, I'd never do that to someone. But the next day, Larkin called me and told me he wanted to be tested. It was a miracle. We were a perfect match. We went through months of preparation, but 4 days away from the surgery, my blood test shows an abnormality, and we were suddenly unmatched. It was devastating. I felt like giving up, but Larkins kept pressing me to consider a pair donation. He offered to donate his kidney to an absolute stranger if the hospital would find me a match. And they did. Larkin gave his kidney to a woman and I received one from her husband. I was forever changed by this man. Larkin is someone who truly lived his life for other people. Not only did he give me the gift of life, but he showed me what it means to be a human on this earth. We were at the laundromat together. My dad took the cars to get at lunch and just never came back. He was only 24 and I guess he couldn't handle the pressure of being a young dad. My mom was left in a very tough spot because not long afterward my health problems began. I started walking with a limp. None of the doctors would figure out what could none of the doctor could figure it out. It's around the time my mom met Eric. Both of them were working at Red Lobster. She was a waitress. Eric was a bartender. I was only 5 years old, so I knew him as mom cool friend with the really long sideburns. We started spending more and more time at his rental house. He had an original Nintendo that he let me play. We spent our first Christmas together. As things got more serious with my mom, Eric really took charge of my house. He helped pay the specialist. He drove us to children's hospitals around the country. Finally, we found a doctor who gave me a correct diagnosis, and I was able to get the medication I needed. Not long afterwards, my mom and Eric got married. They had three more children, but he treated me like his son. When I was in high school, our youngest brother passed away, and I don't think my parents ever really recovered. Recently, they got a divorce, so there's no legality to Eric and I relationships anymore. It's become much more of a friendship, but he's always been the father figure that I almost didn't have. 30 years ago, Eric stepped into a mess. Poor single mother, disabled kid. He could have run the other direction, but he didn't. He decided to get in there, get his hands dirty, and become a father. And that's the reasons I became the man I am today. You you cannot go into the whole thing thinking one, you will were pretty shocked to learn that we were having twins. We were living in Las Vegas for my husband's job. We didn't have any family around us, and I was getting nervous about doing everything myself. Our neighborhood had one of those communal mailbox areas, and I think that's where I first met our neighbors Joe and Mary. Those were they were the sweetest people. Mary was getting ready to retire, and one day she mentioned that she'd like to help when the babies came. I'm not looking for a job, she told me, but when I was raising my boys, I always wondered what it would be like to have an extra hour in the day. I wasn't sure about the seriousness of her offer, but sure enough, on the first morning I was alone with the twins. Mary called and asked if I needed anything. She came over for about an hour while I took a shower. Then she came over the next day and the next. Mary ended up coming over every weekend for an entire year. She'd give me a short break and do whatever needed to be done. Repair the bottles, fold the laundry, wash the dishes. Every time she walked in the door, she always said the same thing. How are my babies today? We became good friends during our time together. My own mother was suffering from Alzheimer's, so she wasn't able to provide the comfort and advice I needed. Mary helped with that too. It wasn't really, it wasn't anything really deep, just simple stuff about mothering that otherwise I have to find in a book. Some night, the doorbell would ring and she have dinner for us. The most wonderful Italian food. Her specialty was Mama Mary meatballs. We ended up leaving the cities when my kids turned 4, but Mary and I stay in touch on the phone. I always send her a Mother's Day card. She's hoping to come to Indiana for the kids' graduation, but by the time she's were too ill to travel. Mary passed away a few years ago. But up until the end of her life, every time she called, she always greeted me the same way. How are my babies today? I'm a first generation American, so education was extremely important in my house. I'd have family members tell me, you should be a doctor, but it always seemed unobtainable. So I decided to major in accounting. And to tell you the truth, I enjoyed the work for a long time. I love crunching numbers. It brought me joys. It brought my parents joys too. My father loves telling people that his daughter worked on Wall Street, so I never questioned my path. Then came September 11th. It was a beautiful morning, just like this. We could see everything from our office window. When the first plane hit, everyone assumed it was an accident. Then the next plane hit, and people started running out of the building. We stayed home for 3 weeks. Our office were used for emergency triage, and it felt like a war zone when we came back. You could still smell the fumes coming through the vents. Things never went back to normal for me. I remember coming to work on the 4th of July and thinking, why am I working on a holiday? It's not like I'm saving lives. That's when I decided to go back to school. I found a college that would let me do nights and weekends. After 2 full years of prerequisite courses, I was accepted into the medical school. And that's when things really got tough. I'm 35 at that point. I had been a vice president at Citibank. I'm full of confidence. But suddenly I'm in class with all these younger people and I'm struggling. It's more hard. But I found a crew of other people to support me and I was focused. I knew exactly what kind of pediatrician I wanted to be. Ever since I've graduated, even in residency, I've been working with children in underserved community. Some of patients grew up in homeless shelters, but all of them get my very best. When I get back, my patients will say, Dr. Nelson really cares about my daughter, and I do really care. It's not an easy job by any means. I'm still working night and weekends and holidays. But it's a different attitude. I've never had a day when I wake up feeling like I didn't want to go to work. I met Claire during my junior years of college. She was the first girl I ever dated. I swung and missed so many times. It was odd having somebody who finally reciprocated my feeling. I've never been I never been very popular in high school. I didn't have a core group of friends. I wasn't an athlete, and before I met Blair, the only thing I had going for me was my intelligence. I was always able to make good grades, so I sort of clung to that. I became a perfectionist. I wouldn't even sign up for AB classes because I didn't think I could make an A plus. When I got accepted to a great law school, I finally felt like I was being vindicated. I was in the top quarter of my class, but during my final year, Claire and I were taking a trip to her parents' house, and we got in a bad accident on the highway. I woke up in a daze. When the doctor scanned my head for a concussion, they discovered a benign tumor. My brain surgery was scheduled for the next day. The surgeon told me to expect some memory loss during my recovery, but it was much worse than I expected. I asked the same question over and over. Sometimes I couldn't remember a conversation that happened earlier in the day. And I ended up failing the bar exam even though I studied my very hardest. Eventually, I was able to pass the exam, but it's been a struggle ever since. Over the past 7 years, it's been a constant battle to convince myself I'm still normal, to convince myself I'm still smart. But Claire has been a total angel. She's always telling me that nobody is perfect and that nobody needs to be perfect. She's reminding me that she's not with me because I'm smart or because I'm a lawyer. She's with me because I'm a good person and a good father, and I'm deserving of love on those grounds alone. Claire is the one who told me to send in my story. She wanted me to tell you about how I passed the bar exam after my brain surgery, but today is our 8th anniversary, and I just wanted to tell her thanks for always be there. After my grandmother passed away, Dad stepped out of the hospitals for some fresh air. When he said a prayer and asked my grandmother to send him a sign, when he opened his eyes, there was a dam at his feet. And after that day, he began to look for dams everywhere. I was 6 years old at that time, and he's always get me to help him search. My head would be down wherever we went. Sometime when I was in the third grade, my parents sat me down and told me that Dad had cancer. I remember sitting in the guidance counselor office during recess. Apparently, he's already been sick for several years. It's a rare type of cancer, and it was aggressive. It would go away for 2 months at a time, but it would always come back. But even the people who knew him had no idea. He never let it stop him. He worked really hard. Unfortunately, his last few years lined up with my angsty teenage years. I pushed him away a lot. I wanted to hang out with my friends, and that wasn't really the artistic type. So I didn't think we had much in common. But he kept trying, and things did get better between us. He was really silly and affectionate. He buzzed into my room when I was studying, singing at the top of his lungs, using a bottle of shampoo as a microphone. He always asked me to get coffee or breakfast, and I usually say no because it's hard when you have a terminally ill patient. You think about it all the time, but it's the last thing you want to think about. And that this knowledge that the closer you become, the harder it's going to be. He died when I was 16. It was November 30th. I remember walking around the parking lot as his funeral started at the ground, staring at the ground. There wasn't a damn anywhere. But it's really pissed me off. And it really pissed me off. I was looking at the sky, shouting at the sky, but nothing. We found over 300 dams when he was alive, but I couldn't find any after he died. I searched everywhere for an entire month. Then one day, I had a really bad day, so I decided to visit his grave for the very first time since his funeral. I parked my car, walked down the steps, and found my dad's blank. And I looked down at my feet, and there it was.